A Virginia man claims he spotted Bigfoot and he has the video to prove it.
Deep in the Gold Coast hinterland, a chance encounter these Yowie hunters insist is the breakthrough they've been searching for.
They say they have taken photos of the footsteps of the Yeti, the mythical snow creature which resides in a part of Nepal.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to my podcast, Bigfoot Throughout the Ages and in Different Cultures. So, Bigfoot is a character that has fascinated me throughout my childhood. To me, describing Bigfoot as a character probably doesn't do them justice. They were more like an enigma. I grew up binge-watching episodes of Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet and being amazed with all the crazy adventures people went on to try to track them down. I also grew up hearing a lot of stories in Chinese about Yeren, which translates roughly to wild man. So most Americans probably haven't heard about this, but it's essentially the Chinese version of Bigfoot. The Bigfoot that most Americans are familiar with is probably the ones they hear about in local legends and on their small regional television stations. Take, for example, my home state of Oklahoma. There's a small town in the middle of nowhere that is known for Bigfoot sightings, and it hosts a festival where thousands of people who believe in Bigfoot travel to attend it every year. The fact that so many different cultures in different areas all have so many believers in Bigfoot has always made me wonder if there's actually a chance it exists. Unlike monsters like the Loch Ness that are just single occurrence, it seems like Bigfoot is everywhere. So my goal throughout this podcast is to dive deeper into all the major variants and then try to analyze and explain their origins while simultaneously trying to explain why the phenomenon of Bigfoot has become so widespread. So far, I've been relating the different variants to the American Bigfoot, which just isn't very precise. In the broad context of this podcast, I'm going to be using the more appropriate term Sasquatch, which refers to essentially a man-like creature that resembles a hairy gorilla and moves on two legs. Having a term like this is super useful because even in America, there are different variations of this hairy beast. Take, for example, the skunk ape of Florida, which is a Sasquatch that has garnered a lot of attention in recent years with appearances all over social media and pop culture news. It's part of the big Florida man meme culture, where people make fun of all the crazy things people do in Florida and believe in. The skunk ape is the newest major Sasquatch monster, and it's the only one birthed during an era of improved communication and the internet. So let's just start our analysis here with the most modern Sasquatch variant and work our way back chronologically. The first reports of the skunk ape were in the late 1900s, and they all described a 7-foot-tall, human-like figure that had the hair of an orangutan and smelled like a skunk, and it was always seen roaming the Florida Everglades. The person who is now actually the largest proponent and believer for the skunk ape was one of the first people who claimed to have had a sighting during the late 1900s. That guy, Dave Shealy, had an experience that was similar to all of the other sightings. While hunting with his brother in the swamp, he saw what looked to be a man but covered completely in hair very far in the distance. Ever since then, this guy has dedicated his life to finding and learning more about the skunk ape. He has his own campground and tourist destination set up in the swamp, with a website dedicated to selling merchandise. Being one of the newest variants, there's been very little research or proof behind the skunk ape craze. Most of the research is done by fanatics like Dave, who publish their findings on websites and journals that are definitely not the most credible. And all of their discussions regarding finds and speculations are carried out on online chat rooms and forums. They share their experiences with the skunk ape and grainy photos of what is supposed to be never before seen pictures of the skunk ape. From what I can make out, all of the pictures look like a collage of bushes that slightly resemble a humanoid figure. Based on what I could find while researching, the strongest argument in favor for the existence of the skunk ape is the fact that Florida has one of the largest areas of uninhabited land in America, with millions of acres of swamp that are extremely difficult for humans to explore. So that's about it for the skunk ape. The next Sasquatches I'm going to discuss are the ones that I have lumped in a group that I call the, quote, colonial era origin Sasquatches. These Sasquatches all originated from the early days of colonialism, when the settlers first interacted with the natives and explored new lands. This period of the very early 1800s resulted in these European nations being exposed to the culture of the natives for the first time, resulting in the creation of many new Sasquatchian creatures. These creatures included the Bigfoot we all know, the Australian Yowie, and the Indonesian Orang Pendek. During the rush to claim North American land, French, British, and Spanish settlers all heard stories from the locals about these massive beasts that roamed the forest throughout North America. And while exploring, numerous colonists reported finding massive tracks and hearing loud screaming sounds in the wilderness. These 19th century sightings were particularly prevalent in the Northwest near modern-day Washington and Oregon. Even after the colonial era, the sightings never went away, with almost every state in modern times claiming to have a supposed Bigfoot hotspot. Over the past 300 years, there have been several thousands, if not millions, of sightings, but so far it has all just been anecdotal and there has been zero documented scientific proof. Similarly, both the myth of the Yowie and Orange Pendek have similar origins and lives, just with Christian missionaries and Dutch colonists instead. The distinct difference between all three of these Sasquatches is their physical characteristics, with the Yowie being described as being taller, around 10 foot and less hairy, and the Orang Pendek being smaller and living in the trees of the rainforest. I think the topic of appearance is a great place to segue into analysis of the rationale behind the origins of the Sasquatch. With there being zero scientific proof in favor of the existence of Sasquatches, my point of view when evaluating the sources of these myths is one of decent doubt. This leads me to question how perfectly the appearances and characteristics of the varying Sasquatches fit into their regions. With the Yowie being less hairy in the hotter climate, or the Orang Pendek being more suited to move in the trees, sure, it may just be evolution, or it is simply the people who are behind all of the sightings and rumors trying to make the story sound more believable. So this begs the question, why would someone make up a story about a monster? I think in the two different eras in history that we have analyzed, they both show a clear agenda. In the modern era, having internet notoriety is very profitable, and the man that is the face of the Skunk Ape movement is making a living off of it. In the case of the colonial era, it was in the best interest of the natives to warn the colonists of scary monsters, in the hopes of deterring their conquest. It was also in the best interest of the colonists to bring back mythic tales to their homelands. If they weren't able to bring back riches, they needed something to show for their travels. They would instead tell captivating tales of the new lands in the court of the rich and powerful that would fund their expeditions. So clearly, in both eras, it made the most sense for these people to tell believable stories in the hopes of personal gain. The eras that precede this are a lot harder to explain, as they have no clear agenda. Both Yeren and Yeti are Asian Sasquatches that date back to some of the earliest civilizations, with the stories my mom told me about Yeren originating from the Chinese dynasties in the 500 BC era. One potential rationale is that these were stories meant to teach lessons. The stories from my childhood all revolved around the fact that a misbehaving child who disobeyed his parents would be eaten by Yeren. Similarly, the Yeti was part of early Buddhism in Tibet and played a major part in some of the religious tales. With these myths dating so far back, we have no way of knowing the details surrounding the origin. I believe in both cases that these Sasquatches started off as local legends and then morphed into religious and childhood lessons. It is also very possible that these are the root of all Sasquatchian characters. Research has shown that in the era between these dynasties and the colonial era, much of the world's cultural exchange happened during trading. It just so happens that for much of this era, almost all of the globe was linked by a major trade route, the Silk Road, that passed through these Asian countries. It is feasible that the story of these Asian Sasquatches trickled down all of the cultures in the world, meaning that the Yeti and Yeren are the root of all Sasquatches, completing our analysis. Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed and have a nice day.